And now we've come to our story behind the story segment where we talk about our guests, their current creative endeavors. So, Patsy, uh, we've been talking about reviews. We've been talking about getting reviews on Amazon, our teams, all that stuff. But let's talk about your books. Because, like I said, we reviewed your blurb in one of our webinars, and I was really intrigued by the whole concept. So we've got we've got murders going on. There's cake involved. Uh,
Always.
There was that combination that just struck me. I want to know. I want to. This is maybe an odd question to lead off with, but do you like the cakes? I'm sure. I imagine there's cake featured in the books. Have you created recipes for these, or are you going with like typical traditional recipes and whatnot?
All sorts. There's a lot of food in all my books, really. Because I like to be thorough on my research. So
Yeah.
I've got to put things that I want to research. But I did. There's actually in the village where my series is set, there's a community magazine, and a special issue of that community magazine is my reader magnet. So it's
Okay.
got
Oh, I
in the
love that.
magazine they had a short story competition, so there's short stories to read, and then there's bits from various members of the community, and one of those is a cake recipe.
I
Um,
love it. I
so
That's
love it.
brilliant. That's like such a great reader magnet. Like, here's this town you've just learned all about, and here's the magazine that is from that
yeah,
town. I just
because
love that. That's
it
amazing.
gets in. It's mentioned in the magazine's mentioned in all of them. It's called the village is Little Mallow, and it's
Mhm.
Little Mallow's little mag. That's
Ah,
run by the Verger, who's one of the a key character.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was quite fun to do that, and I've got there's a lot of flowers and gardening in it, and so one of the articles is on how to keep cut flowers fresh.
Right.
So yeah, it was fun to do that, and once you've written a couple of books with the characters, you know the kind of thing they might send in. So that was
Right. Right. Well, and that's gosh, I can't even again, I write space opera, so like I'm envious right now because I'm sure somebody out there has done something really, immersive like that. And I've had my own ideas, but that's I love it. I'm in love with that idea. It honestly makes me want to write something set in, the modern world because I could use
the
something like
cozy village.
right. Well, yeah,
yeah,
cozy sci-fi, maybe. I don't know. I don't know.
yeah, why not?
I've got too many projects on my plate. Will give me more ideas. But how did you get into writing? Is this something you've been doing for a long time? Is this relatively recent?
Yeah, 20 odd years. Well, I got into it by accident. I just did evening classes because I thought it'd be, I'd had a whole change of life. I'd moved, I got divorced, I got a new job. So I wanted something, to take up time. And as you know, writing can do that. But I just got hooked, and I started by writing fiction for women's magazines. And in UK, women's magazines are much more of a thing than they are in the US. You've got Woman's World, I think, is the nearest equivalent that has
Mm.
Mhm.
fiction. And I only ever intended to write short stories. And then one of my short stories got to 80,000 words, and I didn't know the ending. And I thought, this is not a short story. So I did eventually write the novel, but it took 10 years because I had to go and learn a bit about writing them. But the cozy mystery story I wrote for the magazines, because most of them like cozy, nice stories, but obviously they've got to have a bit of conflict or whatever. So quite a lot. I've written quite a lot about the village of Little Mallow, sometimes naming it, sometimes not. But it was a real place to me. And then when we mentioned my camper van, I write a lot in the camper van, and I've
Mhm.
written short stories and books on the location, which is great because
Right.
it's handy for research.
Yeah.
Then come COVID, we can go anywhere, we couldn't use the van. and I wanted to go somewhere nice, so I went to Little Mallow, which I already knew from the short stories, and it's actually it's between the village I live and the next village. There is no space there. I've completely made it up, but there's real places. If they go off to the nearest town, that nearest town is a real town,
Right.
but the village isn't. So I'm not killing off my neighbours. Make it all up and put on. And also I wanted a castle, and this village doesn't have a castle, so I built that. But it was just a nice place for me to go in COVID. And people like going to nice, cozy places. If you want to be a tourist and come to an English village, Little Mallow has got, it's maybe slightly cliched, they're not all exactly like it, but I've got all the things. You've got the little post office, and you've got the cozy pub, and you've got all the neighbours that know each other and keep an eye on each other in good ways and not so good ways. And it was such a real place to me. I mean, I could walk you around there. I know what it's like, except it can expand a bit, because if I suddenly decide I need a new shop or something, I can just put one in.
Sure. Right. Well, and that's the convenience of it being somewhat fictional, right? Is that you can add on to what's already there. But just the fact that you can like actually visit that, again, writing science fiction, I have to make all this stuff up in my head, but I do still try to base it off of like real world locations that I've been to where I can. But yeah, I don't have that advantage of being able to literally stand in the place where my book is set. That's powerful.
I was going to say, because I also use real places, because people like to read about places they've gone or visit places that they've read about. So there are real places you could go to, the places mentioned in it, and you could stand where the village would be if it existed. So people, I know when I'm reading a book and I've gone, I've gone there, or when I've gone to a location and I know I read a book, I'll look out for the streets or the shops or things that are mentioned. So I think that's a nice thing to be able to do.
So I had a question about your reader magnet, just kind of circling back to that. Do you add to that as you add books? Do you create a new one for each of your, if you come up with a new book?
It's the same one for the series. It's just the reader magnet I use for everything now. But I may well add to it, because it's a magazine. I could put new articles and things in. Like I've explained how to find Little Mallow. You need a dinghy. But I've and some scissors and a map. It's a bit complicated. Read the reading magnet. But I could easily add to it, or I might change it, because in order to use a lot, have enough to make like a worth reading, I put short stories in. So it was a special edition, which was the results of a made up short story competition. So they were the entries. I might well change those to ones that fit better. I just, I picked a mix of genres and things that I thought would work. So I might change it around, or as you say, I might add new articles to it and things. But I'm sticking.
I was just thinking, I just thought it was really kind of cool. It could be like a living document as you release a new book. You add in new articles or short stories that go along, or little advertisements for the little shop you created, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, I like that idea.
I mean, it's just so many like ideas. That's a really great idea.
And it's a good example, because a lot of new authors will ask us, well, I don't have content. We're like, be creative. So
this is creative.
Perfect. You don't have to have like a whole free book, or even like a novel or something. You can do that bonus content.
Right.
Well, when I first got my newsletter, I didn't have anything, and I wasn't signed up to Book Funnel. I didn't know what I was doing at all. So I had a 600-word short story that I just put in the newsletter. But at least I was giving something. I did say get a very short story, so people knew what they were getting. But
Right.
yeah, something's better than nothing, isn't it? I think.
Right. No, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, as far as like where are you at like now with your current work in progress?
Well,
What
this
are you?
is book, bit of product placement. Oh, it won't come
Oh,
sharp.
There
there
it
we go.
is.
Got it.
That's the first one that came out at the beginning of the year. The second one came out in July. I'm now the third one's with my beta team, and they're reading it, and I'm editing it, so it's going to be out early next year. And then I've got lots of ideas for more books. You could I can see why people write enormous series, because as soon as you start plotting, you get, oh, I could do this and this, and that's more than one book. So I may do some more.
Is it a trilogy or are
No,
you
it's it
line?
carries on, each book
Okay.
standalone. So
Okay.
if you bought book three, that works as a book on its own. Well,
Sure.
when it comes out, but it goes chronologically, and there's character development. So if you were going to read all three, it makes a lot of sense to start with book
Start with
one.
one.
But personally, I don't like a series where if you didn't start with the first one, you're lost, or it doesn't finish. So I do like them to be standalone, and they're not. Each one's got three point of view characters, but they're not the same ones. So yeah, they go through it. The first one, the main character is the police detective, and then there's the verger who edits the magazine, and then there's a friend of theirs, and then in the next one, that friend again is Ellie is in it, and the verger becomes the main character, and then I've introduced another character who's only had a very tiny part in the first one, and then the next one carries on. There's different point of view characters, but they're not completely new characters, and the ones in here in the first book that aren't point of view characters, you still they're in conversations, or you hear what's happened to them and things. So I try
So
and, if you've got a favorite character, at least you'll know what happened to them, even if it
right.
wasn't a major part of the plot.
But you've
Right.
got multiple points of entry, and that's smart. So
Point of view. Yeah, because just from my own experience, I know you pick up a book and you don't always necessarily know it's part of a big series, and you want to be able to read it. You don't want to have to. Well, there's no point me reading this till I've gone and bought 7 other books and gone through those. It's it can be off-putting, but you still get something. If you read the second one and then realize that it was the first one, you could go and read it. I'm careful not to do big spoilers. So in book 2 it doesn't say the person that did the crime in book 1 was whoever, which it's quite difficult. Yeah, so I think, to be fair to the readers, you should be able to buy a book and it works as a book, even if it's part of a series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a
Different
challenge.
genres work differently with that, though. I think a crime is easy because you have a crime and it can be resolved at the end, so that's a whole book. Maybe in fantasy and things where it's a huge, you've got to build everything. Maybe that works differently.
Yeah, if you've got a really like plot lines that are being developed over a long period of time, I could see how that would be a little tough to do with having multiple points of entry. But at the same time, like I can think of a series that I jumped into, like it was an audio series actually, on YouTube of all places. And so that's kind of how I stumbled upon it. I'm like, I knew of this guy, and he has a fairly long, audiobook series on YouTube. And I just saw one in my feed one day and hopped in. It was book 6, but it got me into it. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to go back and start from the beginning. I don't think that he wrote them intentionally to be standalone, because I didn't get the feel that it was, but it was still enough to get me interested. I was still, figuring out his writing style, which I liked, and then also meeting some of those characters, and it worked out for me in that case. So yeah, I think that's a smart way to do it if you can. But I imagine it's challenging to, because you have to almost like craft that ahead of time to know like what you're you can include and what you shouldn't include, and to avoid spoilers?
Yeah, it'll probably get harder because one of the things with the crime stories, eventually in this village there's been a lot of crimes, and how aware the characters have happened, and so you've got to work on that. But
starts to become maybe a little suspicious if there's been a whole string of high profile crimes and everybody's acting like it's business as usual. But
yeah,
I can see that.
Well, we all remember Angela Lansbury. I mean, like nobody wants to, she's the common denominator, folks.
Patsy, I want to thank you for joining us. This was a great conversation. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Thank you for watching. Check out these other videos from BookFunnel, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.